Hey everyone, I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on the next terrifying upload. It really helps the channel grow and lets me keep bringing you more of the content you love. I never thought I'd share this, but something happened on Tinder last month that still keeps me up at night. I know it sounds crazy, and I've been hesitant to tell anyone, but I need to get this off my chest. I've always been skeptical about supernatural stuff, but this experience shook me to my core. My sister Emily passed away 5 years ago in a car accident. She was only 24, and it hit our family hard. We were incredibly close growing up, being only 2 years apart. She was more than just my sister, she was my best friend. I've mostly learned to cope with it, but sometimes the grief still sneaks up on me when I least expect it. There are days when I think I'm fine, and then something small reminds me of her, and it all comes rushing back. Last month, I was mindlessly swiping through Tinder on a Friday night. It was one of those lonely evenings when you're just trying to kill time. I hadn't had much luck with dating apps, but I kept using them anyway. That's when I came across a profile that made my heart stop and my blood run cold. The woman's name was Emily. That alone wouldn't have been weird. It's a common enough name, but her photos looked so much like my sister that I had to do a double take. Same wavy brown hair, same dimpled smile, even the same way of tilting her head in photos. I know how this sounds, but it wasn't just a passing resemblance. It was like looking at my sister's photos, the kind of similarity that makes you question your own sanity. I sat there staring at my phone for what felt like hours, my hands trembling. The more I looked at her pictures, the more details I noticed. The way she scrunched her nose when she laughed, the slight asymmetry of her smile, even the small scar above her eyebrow from when we crashed our bikes as kids. I kept telling myself it had to be a coincidence, but something felt off. After about 20 minutes of internal debate, I swiped right. We matched instantly. Her first message mentioned how she loved the photo of me hiking in Colorado. My stomach dropped. My sister and I had gone hiking there together the summer before she died. It was our last trip together. I tried to stay casual, but then she started mentioning other things. Little details about my childhood that only my sister would know. Like the time I broke my arm falling from our treehouse, or the name of my first pet goldfish, Mr. Bubbles, who lived for an unusually long time. My whole body went cold. I wanted to believe it was just someone playing a cruel prank, maybe a relative or old friend who knew these stories. But the way she wrote, the specific details she knew, it was exactly how Emily would talk. She even used the silly nickname she had for me when we were kids, something I'd never shared on social media. I stayed up all night messaging her, unable to look away from my phone. She knew things that weren't on social media, things only Emily would remember. Like the secret hideout we had in the woods behind our old house, where we'd hide our candy stash from our parents, or the made-up language we created as kids that we used to pass notes in class. She remembered the exact words to our secret handshake song. With each message, I felt more confused and terrified. Part of me wanted to stop responding, to delete the app and pretend this never happened, but another part of me couldn't let go. It was like getting to talk to my sister again, even though I knew it couldn't really be her. Could it? When I finally worked up the courage to ask who she really was, there was a long pause. The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times. Then a message appeared asking if I missed her. Before I could reply, her profile vanished, just disappeared completely, like it had never existed. I sat there refreshing the app, but she was gone. I tried searching for her profile again. I even created a new account, thinking maybe I'd been blocked, but there was no trace of her. The screenshots I took of our conversation were gone from my phone too, which made the whole thing even more unsettling. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined the whole thing, but I know I didn't. The details were too specific, too real. The next day, I drove to my parents' house and dug through our old photo albums. I needed something tangible, something to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. I found a picture of Emily from her last birthday. She was wearing a distinctive necklace, a small silver pendant with a butterfly that our grandmother had given her. It was the exact same necklace that the Emily from Tinder was wearing in one of her photos, the same necklace that we buried her with. I haven't told anyone else about this. My parents have been through enough, and my friends would probably think I'm losing it. Maybe I am. But I know what I saw and what happened that night. Every detail is burned into my memory. I deleted Tinder after that. I couldn't handle seeing another Emily pop up, even if it was just a normal person who happened to share her name. Sometimes I catch myself checking my phone, half expecting to see a message from her. Part of me wishes I could talk to her one more time, but mostly I'm scared of what might happen if I did. I still don't know what to make of it all. Was it really Emily somehow reaching out? A cruel prank? Or am I just seeing connections that aren't there because I miss my sister? I don't think I'll ever know for sure. I've tried researching similar experiences online, but nothing quite matches what happened to me. The weirdest part is that it happened exactly 5 years after her death, to the day. I didn't even realize that until later when I checked the date. It was also around 11:47 p.m. when her profile disappeared, the same time her accident had occurred 5 years earlier. I try not to think about it too much, but sometimes when I'm lying in bed at night, I remember those messages and that familiar smile in the photos. I guess some things just can't be explained. All I know is that I'm never going back on dating apps again, and sometimes late at night my phone screen lights up with notifications from an unknown number. I never check them anymore, but part of me wonders if it's her, still trying to reach out. The rational part of my brain says it's impossible, but after what happened, I'm not so sure about anything anymore. Maybe some people we lose aren't really gone. Maybe they find ways to reach out to us when we need them most. Or maybe grief just makes us see things that aren't there. Either way, I'll never forget that night on Tinder when my sister's ghost. What happened to me on Tinder last month still keeps me up at night. I know it sounds dramatic, but hear me out. This isn't your typical catfish story or bad date experience. It's something that made me question everything about my online presence and personal safety. I was doing my usual mindless swiping one Friday night, wrapped in my blanket with a glass of wine, when I came across this weird profile. Instead of the usual gym pics or dog photos, this guy had just one blurry photo and a bio written like a puzzle. It said something about following breadcrumbs to find true love. I know. Red flag central, but I was bored, and it seemed different from the countless looking for my soulmate bios I'd seen that night. Plus, I'd just gone through a breakup and was feeling a bit reckless with my swipes, so I swiped right. We matched instantly. His first message wasn't a "hey" or a cheesy pickup line. It was another riddle about a morning ritual involving 2 sugars and watching the sunrise. I rolled my eyes at first, but then felt a chill run down my spine. That's exactly how I take my coffee every morning on my balcony. I remember nearly dropping my phone when I read it. I convinced myself it was just a coincidence. I mean, lots of people drink coffee with 2 sugars, right? But then his messages got weirdly specific. Each new riddle seemed to reveal something about my life. He mentioned a black cat crossing paths 17 steps from home, exactly like the stray that hangs around my apartment building. He described a daily walk that matched my route to work perfectly, even mentioning the broken sidewalk tile I always skip over. At first, I thought it was kind of exciting, like he was some sort of mystery man who'd figured me out. Maybe he'd seen me around the neighborhood, but things got darker. He started describing details about my life that nobody could just guess. The exact number of plants on my windowsill, the time I leave for work, even the coffee shop where I grab my morning brew. He knew about the chai tea I ordered when it rained, and the chocolate croissant I treated myself to on Fridays. I started looking over my shoulder everywhere I went. Was he watching me? Had he been following me? I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time my phone buzzed with a new notification, my heart would race. I began taking screenshots of our conversations, thinking I might need them later, though I wasn't sure for what. The riddles kept coming, each more detailed than the last. He knew about the small tear in my favorite running shoes, the way I always forgot to water the plant by my kitchen window, even the fact that I'd started taking longer routes home to avoid construction work on Main Street. It was like he had a front row seat to my life, and I was just realizing I'd been performing all along. The final straw came when he sent a riddle about a woman who sleeps with her bedroom window cracked open, 3 stories up in apartment 3B. That's my apartment. I never mentioned my apartment number to him. Ever. I felt sick to my stomach reading that message. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I immediately went to report his profile, but when I opened Tinder, he was gone. Unmatched. Vanished. Like he never existed. I searched through my matches, my messages, everything. But there was no trace of him. It was like trying to prove you'd seen a ghost. I deleted Tinder that night, changed my routines, started taking different routes to work, moved my morning coffee to a different shop. I even got extra locks for my windows and doors. For a week, I stayed with my sister, too scared to sleep in my own apartment. My friends tell me I'm overreacting, that maybe he just got lucky with his guesses or found me on social media. But they didn't see those messages. They didn't feel that slow build of dread as each riddle hit closer to. It's been a month now, and sometimes I still catch myself looking for him in crowds, wondering if he's watching. I've started keeping a journal of strange things I notice, cars that might be following me, people who seem to show up too often in my daily routine. Maybe I'm being paranoid, but this experience taught me something. Sometimes the scariest puzzles are the ones where you're the answer. I did a deep dive into my social media after this happened, went through everything with a fine-tooth comb, made all my accounts private, removed location tags from my posts, changed my usernames. But here's the scary part. Even after going through everything, I couldn't figure out how he knew some of those details. They weren't things I'd posted about or shared online. They were just parts of my daily life that only someone watching me would know. I still don't know who he was or how he knew so much about me. Part of me doesn't want to know. But I do know one thing. I'm done with dating. Give me awkward setup dates from friends or meeting someone at a coffee shop any day. At least then I can see who I'm really dealing with. The weird thing is, I checked my phone screenshots from that night recently, wanting to show a friend proof of what happened. But when I looked through my photos, all the screenshots were gone. Just like his profile, they'd vanished without a trace. I went through my recently deleted folder, my cloud backup, everything, nothing. Now I'm left wondering if I imagined the whole thing. But then I'll notice someone lingering too long near my apartment building, or catch a glimpse of someone watching me from across the street, and all those feelings come rushing back. Last week I found a note in my mailbox. It was typed, no signature, just another riddle. This one was about a woman who thinks she's escaped a game, only to realize it's just beginning. I threw it away immediately and didn't tell anyone about it. What would be the point? Without proof, it just sounds like I'm losing my mind. So here's my advice. If you're on dating apps and match with someone who seems to know too much, trust your gut. Some puzzles aren't meant to be solved, and sometimes the most dangerous games are the ones where you don't even realize you're playing until it's too late. I still take my coffee with 2 sugars, but I drink it inside now, away from my balcony. Some habits are hard to break, but others? Well, let's just say I've learned to be more careful. I really shouldn't have been on Tinder that late at night, but being new to Seattle and working from home had left me feeling pretty lonely. It was around 11 p.m., and I was just mindlessly swiping while watching some Netflix show I wasn't paying attention to. The rain was hitting my windows pretty hard, typical Seattle weather that I still hadn't gotten used to after moving here 3 months ago. That's when I matched with this profile that caught my attention. No photo, just a black square, but the bio was clever. It had this funny joke about Seattle's weather and coffee addiction that made me laugh. The bio mentioned something about how Seattleites don't tan, they rust, and how they measure time in coffee cups rather than hours. Usually I wouldn't swipe right on someone without a picture, but something about the writing style seemed genuine and local. We started messaging, and the conversation flowed naturally. They were witty, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed really interested in my work as a graphic designer. When I asked about their missing profile picture, they explained they worked in cybersecurity and preferred privacy. It made sense, I guess. They knew a lot about the local tech scene and mentioned working for one of the bigger companies in the area, though they didn't specify which one. After about an hour of chatting about everything from favorite hiking spots around Mount Rainier to the best coffee shops in Capitol Hill, they mentioned being a musician and offered to send me a voice note of some music they'd been working on. I was curious. Maybe this would give me a better sense of who they were. Plus, I was already feeling comfortable with our conversation, and they seemed to know so much about the area. The voice note came through with a little ding. I plugged in my earphones, expecting to hear some amateur guitar playing or maybe some electronic music, since they'd mentioned being into synthesizers. Instead, what came through made my skin crawl. The audio was distorted, like it was recorded underwater, with this weird static in the background that seemed to pulse with my heartbeat. But that wasn't what scared me. The voice didn't sound human. It was deep, garbled, and seemed to shift between different tones, like multiple voices speaking at once, but slightly out of sync. The message was short, just 5 words, but they made my stomach drop. "You've already let me in." I yanked my earphones out and sat there in silence. My apartment suddenly felt different, colder somehow, like all the air had been sucked out. That's when I noticed a slight breeze. My eyes moved to my front door and I felt my heart stop. It was open, just slightly, maybe an inch or 2. I knew I'd locked it. I always double-check the deadbolt before settling in for the night, especially since moving to the city. My hands were shaking as I looked back at my phone. The profile was gone. Not just our conversation, the entire match had disappeared as if it had never existed. I got up and checked all my windows, my legs feeling weak with each step. They were locked. I checked my balcony door, also locked, but my front door. The deadbolt was unlocked, and the metal looked slightly scratched around the keyhole. I called the police, but what could I tell them? That someone on Tinder sent me a creepy voice note and my door was mysteriously unlocked? They took a report but said there wasn't much they could do without signs of forced entry. The officer suggested I might have forgotten to lock it, but I knew better. I never forget. I ended up staying at my coworker's place that night, making up some excuse about a water leak in my apartment. The next day, I had a locksmith change my locks and install a security camera. I deleted Tinder and made all my social media private. I even went through and deleted old posts that might give away my location or daily routine. It's been 3 weeks, and nothing else has happened, but I still can't shake the feeling that something's not right. Sometimes when I'm alone in my apartment, I swear I can hear that distorted voice, like it's playing faintly from somewhere I can't find. It's especially bad at night when the rain hits my windows. The sound sometimes seems to form words. My friends tell me I'm being paranoid, that maybe I accidentally left my door unlocked that night, or maybe it was just some troll with voice modulation software trying to scare people. But here's the thing. I checked my phone's audio settings the next day. According to my phone, no voice note was ever played. There was no record of it in my data usage or recent files. I even contacted Tinder support, but they said they had no record of any match being deleted from my account that night. The only proof I have that any of this happened is my own memory and this lingering feeling of being watched. I still work from home, but now I keep my blinds closed and background music playing at all times. I can't stand silence anymore. It reminds me too much of those moments right after I heard that voice. I've thought about moving, but my lease isn't up for another 8 months, and breaking it would cost more than I can afford right now. Last night, I thought I heard my doorknob turning. I sat perfectly still in my bed, barely breathing until morning came. Nothing happened, but I can't help wondering if whatever I let in that night is still here, waiting. The security camera hasn't picked up anything unusual, but sometimes it glitches and stops recording for a few minutes at a time, always around 3 a.m. I've started noticing other small things too. Sometimes my coffee mug is in a different place than where I left it. My sketchbook pages are slightly wrinkled as if someone's been flipping through them. The other day I found my laptop open when I was sure I'd closed it before going to bed. Small things that could be explained away, but together they form a pattern that terrifies me. I'm writing this as a warning, I guess. Be careful who you trust online, even if their bio makes you laugh. Pay attention to the small details that seem off, and maybe don't listen to voice notes from strangers at 11 p.m. when you're home alone. Some doors, once opened, can't be easily closed, and some presences, once invited in, never really leave. I just heard my bedroom door creak. I know I oiled the hinges yesterday. I should probably stop writing now. I need to warn others about meeting strangers from dating apps. Even now, a week later, I can barely sleep thinking about what could have happened. I'd been on Tinder for a few months, mostly just swiping when bored. Nothing serious came from it until I matched with Sarah. Her profile seemed normal, 25, worked in marketing, lived nearby. We chatted for a few days and everything felt natural. She wasn't pushy or weird like some matches, just friendly. We had similar interests in true crime podcasts and hiking, which now seems darkly ironic. Last Friday, she invited me to a house party she was hosting. Said it would be casual, just friends hanging out, with some board games and drinks. I figured why not? Meeting in a group setting seemed safer than a one-on-one date. She sent me the address and told me to come around 9 p.m. Looking back, I should have been suspicious that she didn't give many details about who else would be there. I remember pulling up to the house that night. Something felt off right away. The street was empty and dark, no other cars parked nearby, no music or party sounds. The house itself looked abandoned. Paint peeling, overgrown yard, some windows boarded up. Dead leaves everywhere, like no one had touched the place in years. I double-checked the address. It matched what she sent. I sat in my car for a few minutes trying to make sense of it. Maybe I got the time wrong? I texted her but got no response. Called her number, but it went straight to voicemail. Her Tinder profile had disappeared too. The whole situation felt wrong, like walking into a trap in slow motion. I was about to leave when I noticed movement through one of the uncovered windows, just a quick shadow passing by. Then I heard what sounded like laughing coming from inside but muffled. The kind of laugh that makes your skin crawl. Not happy or natural, more like something trying to imitate human laughter. More shadows moved past different windows now, multiple people. But no lights were on inside, just dark shapes moving around. The laughing got louder. I could see figures passing between rooms upstairs, their movements jerky and unnatural. The streetlight caught something reflecting in one window, like eyes watching me. My hands were shaking as I started my car. The key almost fell from my grip twice. As I pulled away, I glanced in my rearview mirror. Several dark figures stood in the upstairs windows watching me leave. They were too tall to be normal people, their proportions all wrong. I drove home way too fast that night. running 2 red lights. The next day, I did some research on the address. The house had been empty for years after the previous owners disappeared. Missing persons case never solved. Local teens claimed it was haunted. There were stories about strange lights and sounds at night. Some people reported seeing figures in the windows, just like I did. I reported the fake profile to Tinder and the police, but nothing came of it. The number was a burner phone, no way to trace who was really behind it. The police seemed uninterested, saying they get lots of reports about dating app scams. But this felt different than a regular scam. I still use dating apps, but now I reverse image search photos and meet people in public places first. I keep thinking about what would have happened if I'd gone inside that house. Sometimes late at night, I remember those shadows in the windows and that horrible laughing. The way they moved wasn't human. Looking back, there were red flags I ignored. Sarah's profile had few photos and they all looked professionally shot. She was vague about personal details, never mentioned where she worked specifically. The party invitation came suddenly after only a few days of chatting. Her messages were perfect, no typos, always quick responses like they were scripted. I know this sounds like an urban legend or horror story. I wouldn't believe it myself if I hadn't experienced it. But it happened, and I'm sure I'm not the first person lured to that house through dating apps. I've found similar stories online, people invited to parties at abandoned houses, always through dating apps, always disappearing if they went inside. To anyone reading this, trust your gut when meeting people online. If something feels wrong, it probably is. That uneasy feeling I had pulling up to the house, I should have listened to it right away. The whole situation felt like a setup from the start. I drive a different route home now to avoid that street, but sometimes I wonder about those figures in the windows. Were they other victims? Squatters? Something worse? I'll never know, and maybe that's for the best. I try not to think about what their real forms might look like. The house is still there, still empty. New dating profiles pop up sometimes trying to lure people there. Different names, different photos, but always the same pattern. I report them when I see. I hope sharing this prevents someone else from ending up in my situation, or worse, actually going inside. My friends think I'm paranoid now, but they didn't see what I saw. They didn't hear that inhuman laughter or see those twisted shapes in the windows. Sometimes I wake up at night thinking I hear that same laughter outside my apartment. I've installed extra locks on my doors. Stay safe out there. Not everyone online is who they claim to be. Some aren't even people at all. I learned that lesson the hard way that night, but at least I lived to warn others. Just remember, if a match invites you to a party at an abandoned house, maybe swipe left on that one. And if you're ever driving down a dark street and see shadows moving in empty windows, keep driving. Don't stop. Don't look back. They might be watching. I still check local missing persons reports, wondering if anyone else fell for the trap. The house claims new victims every few months, according to local rumors, but no bodies are ever found. Just empty cars eventually towed from the street. I got lucky that night. I'd been using dating apps for a while, mostly having normal experiences, some good dates, some bad ones, nothing too crazy. After my last relationship ended, I decided to give Tinder another try. Then I matched with this guy named Mark. His profile looked perfect, good job as a software engineer, great photos showing him traveling and hiking, and he had this warm smile that seemed genuine. Looking back now, maybe it was too perfect. We chatted for about a week before deciding to meet up. He was charming and funny in our messages, asking thoughtful questions and seeming really interested in getting to know me. He never pushed too hard for personal information, which I actually appreciated at the time. We finally agreed to meet at this cozy Italian restaurant downtown. I remember feeling excited but nervous. The usual first date butterflies. Nothing felt off yet. When I got there, he looked exactly like his photos, which was already a good sign. He'd picked a quiet corner table, and everything felt really comfortable at first. He was well-dressed, polite to the server, and seemed completely normal. We ordered wine and started talking about normal first date stuff. Our jobs, hobbies, where we grew up. He was easy to talk to, and I started to relax. Then things got weird. We were talking about childhood memories, and he mentioned something that made my stomach drop. He brought up this specific memory from when I was 10 years old, about how I'd broken my arm falling from a tree in my grandparents' backyard in Ohio. The thing is, I'd only ever posted about that once, in a Facebook status years ago, and deleted it the same day because I'd felt embarrassed about oversharing. I specifically remember deleting it because my mom had commented saying I shouldn't share such personal stories online. At first, I thought maybe I'd mentioned it in our chats and forgotten, but I knew I hadn't. I'd been careful about not sharing too much too soon. I started feeling really uneasy. especially when he kept bringing up other small details about my life. My old high school volleyball team, a trip I took to Canada with my college roommates, even the name of my first pet, a goldfish named Bubbles that I'd mentioned in an old Instagram caption from 2016. These were all things buried deep in my social media history, some from accounts I barely used anymore. Some details weren't even online at all. They were things only my close friends would know, like the time I got locked out of my dorm room freshman year wearing just a towel, something I'd only ever told my close friends about at a party. My hands started shaking under the table. The restaurant suddenly felt too warm, too crowded. The wine I'd been drinking turned sour in my stomach. I made an excuse about feeling sick and needing to leave. He kept insisting on walking me to my car, but I firmly refused. As I was leaving, he mentioned he hoped to see me again at the coffee shop near my apartment, one I'd never told him about. It was a small local place I visited every morning before work. When I got home, I double-checked all my locks and started digging. I looked through all our conversations, and there was no way I'd shared those details with him. Then I started checking my social media accounts. That's when I found old comments from random accounts on my posts from years ago, accounts that, looking back, all seemed to have similar writing patterns. They'd been deleted, but I found them in my activity history. I went deeper and discovered several accounts following me across different platforms, all created at different times over the past 4 years. The usernames were different, but they all had similar patterns. They'd comment occasionally on my posts, always friendly but never too obvious. Some had even tried to add my friends. Each account had its own backstory and profile pictures, but they were all him. It hit me that this person, Mark, had been watching me for years. He'd created a detailed picture of my life long before we ever matched on Tinder. Our match wasn't random at all. He'd been planning this, waiting for the right moment to finally meet me in person. He probably knew my daily routine, where I worked, which gym I went to, everything. I immediately blocked him everywhere, changed all my privacy settings, and reported his profile to Tinder. I also filed a police report, but they said there wasn't much they could do since he hadn't explicitly threatened me. They just told me to stay vigilant and document everything. The scariest part? A few days later, I got a friend request from a new account. The profile picture was of a sunset, but the first post was a check-in at that Italian restaurant, tagged on the exact date and time of our date. There was no caption, just the location tag and timestamp. I blocked it immediately, but the message was clear. He was letting me know he could still reach. It's been a month, and I still check over my shoulder everywhere I go. I've made all my social media private and deleted a lot of personal information online. I even moved to a different apartment, just to be safe. I changed my running route, switched coffee shops, and asked my workplace to update their security. It feels extreme, but I don't know what else to do. I know this sounds paranoid, but when someone spends years creating an elaborate plan just to meet you, it's terrifying. The worst part is knowing that he's probably still out there, maybe doing this to someone else. I've tried to warn other women in local Facebook groups without sharing too many details, but it's hard because I don't want him to know I'm talking about him. So please, be careful what you share online. Check your privacy settings regularly. Look through your followers and friend lists for suspicious patterns. Be aware of how much information you're putting out there. Things like check-ins, workplace details, and daily routines can be pieced together to create a detailed picture of your life. And if someone knows things about you they shouldn't, trust your gut and get out of there. I got lucky that night, but I can't stop thinking about what might have happened if I hadn't noticed the red flags. What if I'd had more wine? What if I'd let him walk me to my car? I haven't used dating apps since then. Maybe someday I'll feel safe enough to try again, but for now, I'm focusing on healing from this experience and helping others avoid similar situations. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, wondering if he's created new accounts to watch me, or if he's found new ways to track my life. Remember, someone's perfect online presence might be carefully crafted just for you, and not in a good way. Stay safe out there and trust your instincts. I never thought I'd end up telling this story, but after what happened last month, I need to warn others about meeting people online. I'd been using Tinder for a while, mostly out of boredom and maybe a bit of loneliness after my breakup with my girlfriend of 3 years. Dating apps seemed like an easy way to get back out there without dealing with the awkwardness of meeting people in bars or through friends. This girl named Sarah matched with me, and her profile seemed normal enough. 26, worked in marketing, liked hiking and true crime podcasts. We started chatting, and honestly, the conversation flowed really naturally. We messaged back and forth for about 3 weeks, talking about everything from our favorite Netflix shows to our jobs. She was funny, smart, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We had similar tastes in music, and she even knew some obscure bands I liked, which I thought was pretty cool at the time. We planned to meet up at a coffee shop downtown that weekend. I was actually looking forward to it, which wasn't usually the case with Tinder dates. Most of my previous matches had led to awkward conversations that fizzled out after a few messages, but Sarah was different. She kept the conversation going and always had interesting things to say. The night before our planned date, I was just hanging out at home, watching TV and scrolling through my phone. It was around 11:30 p.m. when I heard a knock at my door. Living alone in an apartment complex, I wasn't used to visitors that late. I paused my show and waited, thinking maybe I'd imagined it. Then came another knock, slightly louder this time. I got up and walked to the door, looking through the peephole. The hallway was empty, which made my heart start beating faster. I stood there for a moment, debating whether I should open the door at all. When I finally opened the door, I found a folded piece of paper on my welcome mat. My hands were shaking a bit as I picked it up. Inside, in neat handwriting, it said, "Looking forward to tomorrow." I stood there for a moment, trying to process what was happening. I had never told Sarah where I lived. We'd only discussed meeting at the coffee shop. I hadn't even mentioned which part of town I lived in. I started thinking back through all our conversations, trying to remember if I'd accidentally revealed any details about my location. I quickly shut and locked my door, double-checking all my windows. My mind was racing, trying to figure out how she could have found my address. I went through our entire chat history, confirming that I hadn't accidentally mentioned anything about where I lived. I even checked my social media accounts to see if I'd posted anything that might have given away my location. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about how she could have found me. Maybe she'd seen me around the neighborhood. But that didn't make sense. I worked from home most days and rarely. I ended up blocking her on Tinder and canceling our date through the app before unmatching. I also turned off my location services on all my apps just in case. The next morning, I tried to convince myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was just a mistake or a prank by one of my neighbors. I spent the day working, trying to keep my mind off it, but every time I heard footsteps in the hallway, I found myself tensing up. Around 6 p.m. at the time we were supposed to meet for coffee, someone knocked on my door again. My stomach dropped. I looked through the peephole and saw her standing there. She looked exactly like her photos, wearing a blue dress and holding her phone. She knocked again. I could see her face clearly through the peephole, and the expression she wore made my blood run cold. It wasn't angry or upset. She was smiling like this was completely normal. I stayed completely silent, barely breathing. She kept knocking, each time more insistent than the last. After what felt like forever, she finally left. I thought it was over, but then my phone buzzed with a notification from an unknown number. "I know you're home. Your car is in the parking lot." I called the police and filed a report, but they said they couldn't do much without more evidence of stalking. They took down my statement and said they'd increase patrols in the area, but I could tell they weren't taking it too seriously. I ended up staying at my brother's place for a few days, and when I came back, I found dozens of notes slipped under my door. They were all in that same neat handwriting, asking why I stood her up, saying we were meant to be together. Some of them mentioned specific things I'd done during the days I was gone, which meant she must have been watching my apartment the whole time. I ended up moving to a different apartment complex the following month. I didn't tell anyone except my closest family members where I was going. I deleted all my dating apps and made all my social media. I even changed my routine completely, taking different routes to work, shopping at different stores, and avoiding my usual hangout spots. Sometimes I still check over my shoulder when I'm walking to my car, and I never answer unexpected knocks at my door anymore. Looking back, there were probably signs I missed. She always seemed to know a little too much about my interests, things I hadn't mentioned in our chats. She would reference places I'd been recently, even though I hadn't told her about them. Once she mentioned a restaurant I had lunch at the day before, but I hadn't posted about it anywhere. I guess I was too caught up in how well we seemed to click to notice these red flags. I still don't know how she found my address or how long she might have been watching me before we matched on Tinder. Sometimes I wonder if she's still out there, doing this to other people. The scariest part is that everything seemed so normal at first. We had normal conversations, made normal plans, and she seemed like a normal person. There was nothing obviously wrong or threatening until that first note appeared at my door. If you're reading this and planning to meet someone from a dating app, please be careful. What started as a normal Tinder match turned into the scariest experience of my life. Don't share personal information too quickly, and pay attention to those little things that seem off. Trust your instincts if something doesn't feel right. I've learned that you can never be too careful when it comes to online dating. What seems normal at first can turn dangerous really quickly. These days, I prefer meeting people the old-fashioned way, even if it means being single for a while longer. At least when you meet someone through friends or in person, you have some way to verify who they are. The anonymity of dating apps makes it too easy for people to hide their true selves until it's too late. Sometimes I still get unknown numbers texting me, and every time my phone buzzes with a new notification, I feel my heart rate spike. I know the chances of her finding me again are slim, but the experience has changed me. I'm more cautious now, more aware of my surroundings. Like everyone else, I was just looking to meet new people after my breakup. That's when I matched with Johnny. His profile seemed normal, just a guy in his early 30s with a decent job and some travel photos. Nothing special, but nothing weird either. We chatted for a bit about basic stuff, work, hobbies, the usual. Something felt off though. His responses were polite, but carried a strange intensity. When he started asking about my daily routine, I got uncomfortable and unmatched him. I thought that was the end of it. The next day, I was swiping and saw someone named Mike. It took me a minute to realize it was the same guy as Johnny, just with different photos, same writing style, same questions about my schedule. My stomach dropped. I unmatched immediately and reported the profile. A week passed, and there he was again, this time Thomas. New photos, new job listed, but the same person. I started noticing a pattern in how he wrote messages. He always asked about my gym schedule and favorite coffee shops within the first few exchanges. By this point, I was getting seriously creeped out. How many profiles could one person make? Then it got worse. I was at my usual coffee shop one morning, and I saw him sitting in the corner. He looked just like his original photos as Johnny. When he noticed me looking, he smiled and waved like we were old friends. I left my coffee half finished and practically ran out. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get my car keys out. The next week, he was at my gym. I spotted him watching me from the treadmill area. He wasn't even trying to work out, just standing there, staring. I canceled my membership that day. But then he showed up outside my office building during lunch break. Each time, he acted like running into me was just a happy coincidence. It was like he was trying to make me question my own sanity. I started changing my routine. Different coffee shops, different grocery stores, different routes to... But somehow, he kept appearing. Sometimes as Johnny, sometimes looking completely different like his other profile photos. But I knew it was him by the way he watched me. It was like he had this network of people helping him, or maybe he was just really good at disguises. Either way, it was terrifying. The dating app became a twisted game of whack-a-mole. Every time I blocked one profile, another would pop up. James Robert, William. Different faces, different stories, but always him. He got better at hiding it too. The messages became more subtle, but they always circled back to wanting to know where I'd be. Sometimes he'd mention a new restaurant that had just opened near my apartment, or ask if I'd tried the new gym that had opened up, where I worked. I deleted Tinder, but it didn't matter anymore. He already knew too much about my life. My friend said I was being paranoid, that it couldn't be the same person. How could someone change their appearance so completely? But they hadn't seen what I'd seen. They hadn't noticed the little things, the way he held his coffee cup, the slight tilt of his head when he smiled, the specific questions he always asked. I started documenting everything, taking screenshots of each profile, noting times and places I saw him. The police weren't much help at first. They said they couldn't do anything without proof of an actual threat. They suggested I was just seeing random men who looked similar. One officer even had the nerve to ask if I was imagining things because of stress. Then the notes started appearing. Nothing threatening, just pieces of paper with smiley faces left on my car windshield or slipped under my apartment door. Each one signed with a different name, all names I recognized from his Tinder profiles. I started collecting them, adding them to my documentation. The police still said there wasn't enough evidence to act on. I moved apartments last month. Changed job. I haven't seen him in 3 weeks now, but I still check over my shoulder everywhere I go. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined the whole thing. But then I'll open my phone and find a new Tinder notification, even though I deleted my account. It's like he's found a way to hack into my phone, to remind me he's still watching. Yesterday, I got a new job offer in another state. I'm taking it. My friends think I'm running away, and maybe I am. But they don't understand what it's like to see the same person everywhere, wearing different faces like masks. They don't know what it's like to feel watched every moment of every day. I still don't understand how he did it. Was it really one person? Multiple people working together? Sometimes I think about messaging one of his profiles just to ask why. But I know better now. Some questions are better left unanswered. The scariest part isn't the stalking or the notes or even the different faces. It's not knowing if it will ever really end. Every time I think it's over, he comes back with a new name, a new face. but those same watching eyes. It's like he's everywhere and nowhere at the same time. I'm leaving next week. New city, new start. I haven't told anyone where I'm going, not even my parents. I won't be downloading any dating apps either. I've changed my email, my phone number, even deleted all my social media. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder if he's already there, waiting, with a new face and a new name, ready to match with me all over again. Because that's the thing about people like him, they don't just go away. They adapt, they change, they find new ways to get to you. Maybe I'll never know if it was all in my head, or if he was really as organized and dedicated as he seemed. But I do know one thing: I'll never look at dating apps the same way again. Because sometimes the scariest monsters aren't the ones that look obviously dangerous. They're the ones that look normal, the ones that can change their faces,